Now, tonight's topic, the Keyblade Master. He's very odd. Why? His videos sound like the Rachel Maddow show. I know, right? So boring.
Wait, so according to you, Keyblade Master's videos is just like Rachel Maddow, a journalist for MSNBC, even though Keyblade has never once made a video regarding politics. I'm sorry, what? That comparison makes no goddamn sense, and just saying, well, both are boring, is not enough for it to work.
This is a minor thing, at least in comparison to the rest of the problems I have, but given Kung's piss-poor wording, the comparison didn't actually come from the fact that they were boring this time, but rather he made the comparison before making the claim that Keyblade's content is boring, which is arguably worse. Actually, maybe not even arguably. Kung's point is just that much worse as it comes out of nowhere with no real grab. But let's play with that hypothetical that Kung was merely comparing the two due to how much they bore him. Why would that not be a valid comparison to have? Like, the point of comparison would be how much Kung is disinterested in the two's content, and that's not good enough? Like, you don't explain why, you don't play off of that, you just say, Keyblade's not political, therefore boring isn't enough.
And now it's time for another top 8 list. Tonight's category. Top 8 reasons why the Keyblade Master is still small. Number 8. He has never tried to do commentaries with us.
So Keyblade Master is a small channel because he didn't make a commentary with you? Put that ego away, dude. It's scaring the children.
That's not what he said. Kung had said that Keyblade didn't do commentaries with anyone, not specifically him. The ego isn't there when the idea is shared with other commentators. Not to say he's correct, as, hi, I'm an example you even bring up later, not to mention the likes of Jonah Smith, Fyro for Victory, and Swordzinny, but the point isn't do a video with Kung. The point Kung is making is to do a video with someone else. Anyone else.
Number 7. He used to make videos about cartoons. Number 6. He would try to be Rachel Maddow all the time. Number 5. He's trying too hard to be next Jon Stewart.
Ignoring the Rachel Maddow comparison again, which like I said earlier, made no goddamn sense, but what I will say is, how is it a bad thing for him to talk about cartoons? If that's a reason why someone isn't popular, then I hate to see how you react to people like the mysterious Spencer Enter, or hell, even Anime America. But then we have him comparing Keyblade to Jon Stewart, a guy who talks about politics more often than not in a humorous way. What next? Are you going to say Akraloth is the commentary community's answer to Piers Morgan? Because British! But in all seriousness, when you compare people, actually make sure they make sense. How is that so hard, Mahler?
Shomer, the point of comparison is that Keyblade tries too hard to make jokes and be primarily comedy-based. Jon Stewart runs a show entirely humor-based, and Kung thinks Keyblade is trying too hard to be that, which, as far as Kung is concerned, is a bad thing. Argue how he's wrong, not his comparison.
Number 2. He has never talked to Doodletones before. And number 1. His most popular commentary was his first real one.
Hello? Doodletones just called, and she wants to say, "What's up?" But in all seriousness, the co-op between them came up before you made your video, thus I can safely tell you that he has talked to her. So I don't know what the hell you've been smoking to think that is even a reason. And then your final reason is his most popular commentary is his first real one, which considering his first commentary was 8 months ago, and his second full-length commentary wouldn't be up for another 2 months, of course the video up first will get a head start in terms of more views.
Yes, but that shouldn't inherently mean that it should be the most viewed video on the channel. My first commentary is my 21st most viewed commentary, hitting 10,000 recently-ish, and overall the 30th most viewed video on the channel. This point is essentially telling Kung that people who have been around longer are inherently more popular when that's not the case. There is no real excuse for this.
Alright. He currently has 185 subscribers. He joined on August 27, 2014. And his total amount of views stands at 10,243 views. Okay. That's fine. Okay? Not too bad, you might say. Pretty darn impressive, right? Okay. Now, granted, I've been on YouTube for nearly 9 years, and I had to start all over again because my whole YouTube channel was hacked. Listen to these stats. 914 subscribers and 32,021 views. Really? Unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen.
What you don't seem to factor in was how long apart your very first videos are separated. Your first video on the Kongi Muller channel was uploaded in May of 2016, while Keyblade's first ever video on his channel wasn't uploaded until 6 months later. So no duh, the guy whose video was uploaded first was going to get a head start.
You know, at first I was just gonna write this off and say that this is no excuse again, as time doesn't inherently equal views, but like, this point is actually worse than it first appeared, because the Kongi Mother video in question has lower statistics than Keyblade's, which blows your previous iteration of this argument further out of the water, because when you actually put the examples next to each other, as we see here, we see a clear example of how the older the video does not mean the higher the viewership. To further point out how actually problematic this point is, their first videos wouldn't be the main area of intrigue to the total amount of views a channel has. The amount of videos they post with how consistent the view counts are. And if you must bring up a singular video, bring up their most viewed videos. It'd be a better representation of the total views, as it'd be a bigger percentage to go off of. And show that the reason Kongi Muller has more views would be because he uploads way more frequently, as Keyblade's most viewed video has about 800 more views in a lesser time frame.
So, he is known for making stupid commentaries. He's known for making stupid videos like S stands for. And he's known for talking about a YouTuber with the last name Philosopher. I don't know.
Let's recap. He's known for making stupid commentaries, which is why I only list 2 examples.
Shomer, you do realize people could only be known for 1 or 2 things, right? There are plenty of YouTube one-hit wonders who are known for one video despite having a large library of other videos to look at. Kazon Day is known for Chocolate Rain. ShadyVox is known for Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Abridged. Top 15s are known for Burger King Foot Lettuce. This surpasses YouTubers and goes on to many other aspects, but these examples should be good enough. If Keyblade is only known for those 2 videos, then he's only known for the 2 videos, regardless of how many other examples Kung could bring up, or the quality of those said videos. That's another thing. I'm mostly known for my videos on Medicare and Jar, so therefore inherently I'm known for making bad videos regardless of how many other videos I made or the quality of them. So regardless of the fact that Kung only brought up 2 examples means nothing here, as that doesn't prove that what Kung is saying is incorrect.
A stupid video, which is more a meme video of anything, which isn't new.
This also doesn't at all debunk what Kung says, because 1, it still shows Keyblade makes meme videos, and 2, Kung still thinks of them as stupid. This is a useless point that doesn't prove anything.
And let's reaffirm the first point by referencing the one video I went out of my way to watch to prove he makes stupid commentaries.
Nope, Kung's point is even dumber than that, as he implies that Keyblade's videos are dumb because he did a video on a guy whose name has Philosopher in the name. It wouldn't at all be because of the content within said video, but merely the target that we can gather from the title. This is really unfortunate because you only assume that's the video he watched, and, while yeah, I wouldn't expect Kung to have actually done research because that would take time and effort, still is an assumption regardless. He could have watched more, but also could have watched nothing. The latter option does seem likely at first glance, however, I'm still not going to make an assumption either way. Point is, this is an argument based on an assumption. Good going.
No pomp and circumstance or sketches this time, because it's my first commentary I've made in a long time, and first actual video past, doing my Nuzlocke challenge of Pokemon Platinum that I'm trying to fix because I had an issue and lost some of my video files and kind of screwed up my saves. So I'm trying to fix that now.
Oh no. Don't tell me. Is this unscripted? That's gonna cause problems, isn't it? Alright, I'll go ahead and address this. TOG, I understand that 2011 and 2012 commentaries were typically done without a script, and that may have been fine for that time period, but it's kind of an outdated practice now. Mainly because people understand that if you go unscripted, you can wind up with stupid contradictions, a lack of research, or you can just lose your train of thought completely and go on unneeded and unnecessary tangents that have nothing to do with the video. I guess it's not inherently a problem, as there are some people who are the exception and can legitimately go through a video unscripted and unfiltered and seem perfectly okay. But if I'm to be blunt with this video proves you're not the exception.
The world of Japanese role-playing games, better known as JRPGs, is filled with rich worlds, detailed art, and amazing gameplay.
And you, are about to pull down your pants and take a warm piss all over the entire idea of what a JRPG is, aren't you? Yeah, you are, because you're a special boy.
And here's evidence number 2 that you should script your videos. TOG, these are the intro statements. They're not trying to make an overarching giant point to be debunked just yet. They're simply putting out a subjective idea about what JRPGs actually are. You coming in with, oh, but you're gonna suck, jumps the gun too early and just comes off as a presumptuous statement to poison the well.
There are just some titles that you wouldn't want to get caught playing in front of your parents, or your friends, or anyone, really. Before we begin, subscribe to The Gamer and don't forget to ring that bell to become a part of our notification squad where you'll be the first to know of new content.
And we have already entered the I am a whore section of the video.
See, normally, we let our crazy out in small bursts, and we wait until the very end of the video. But he isn't afraid to show you just who he is and how crazy he is on the first date.
Hell! He gets it out of the way before even the first glass of wine has been served.
You mean like your last interjection?
Without further ado, it's time for 10 JRPGs you should never play when your parents are home. Criminal Girls. Where do we even start with this one?
Both of you, tread lightly, else I may have a tirade to follow.
The premise and execution of Criminal Girls is downright creepy, and there are multiple sequels to the game.
Multiple. As in one.
The premise follows the everyday story of girls who committed sins and are sent to hell. The young girls need someone to save them, and the hero comes in the form of a middle-aged man who does some questionable things to rid them of their sins. Add in some pretty risque graphics, and you have yourself a family game night in the making. Or just one of the most uncomfortable conversations you've ever had with your parents. But Mom, I just need to entice one more girl to free her from her sins and release her from the digital hell.
Ooh, you really haven't played Criminal Girls, have you, gamer? The stimulation that you give the girls in the game is to motivate them to fight, not to save them on that basis alone. I suppose if you wanted to argue, you could say that getting in the fight does get you to the top of the tower and thus gets you into the position to save the souls of the girls, but then at that point I can just point towards your really ugh wording as you're implying that the BDSM is the way to save them, which is not really the case.
Okay, yes. I will give you Criminal Girls. It really is nothing short of a smut game.
You haven't played it either, have you, TOG? Newsflash, the only time smut is involved is during the motivation segments, which isn't the majority of the game. It's a sizable part, but there's much more to it than what people assume at first glance, such as the stories each character told, the symbolism regarding each sin the girls are based on, the actual RPG mechanics of the game, the exploration of the limbo the entire game takes place in. If it was just simply a smut game, there would be a significantly less amount of emphasis on the actual battling, and much more on the tasing. I take my ecchi very seriously.
So, well done. You called out a game for being complete fan service, mixed with a Newgrounds hentai game, while poorly covering hard subjects such as rape.
Excusez-moi? Rape? TOG, you're mistaken. The only issue of rape is barely even implied by one of the characters' backstories, by the way of which is optional to the rest of the game. If you're trying to say the motivation scenes are rape, then I've got really bad news for you. There's no penetration in this game. Maintenance is a whip, edge play is a shock stick, slippery slope is liquid, tickle party's a feather duster, and aftercare is simple cuddling. Rape would imply penetration. You can maybe say that this game is certainly morally curious in regards to the motivation scenes, known as punishment in Japan, as, yeah, you do play as a middle-aged man doing these sexual acts on what are implied to be teenaged girls, but if I can stress this, it isn't rape. Now, as I'm on this note, I do have something else rubbing me the wrong way. Are you really using this whole interjection just to say, you did good, and add nothing to the discussion? What the crap? This does nothing but pad out the video needlessly. There's no point, no jokes, just an, I agree with your entry, and move on. I guess it'd be like that sometimes.
So well done. Claps. Kudos, everyone, clap for the guy. Kudos to you. I have to give you your number 10 spot because that is a good example of a bad JRPG that really you shouldn't play around your family or really play in general, in my opinion. But it does make me wonder why this one is only at number 10 on the list. Please tell me your other games are not going to be less justifiable than this one.
TOG, I trusted you. Fuck man, even assuming this was a list to be put in order. It isn't, but even assuming it was, your whole thing regarding why is this only at number 10 should be as clear as fucking day as to why. They simply thought the other things were more perverted than criminal girls. Now, whether or not they are would be up for debate, but once again you're jumping the gun to tell your audience that nothing will be worse than this, continuing to give your audience a preconceived notion of what's to come. Quit killing the fish, Professor. I'm skipping the Shin Megami Tensei segment just because I don't know the series well enough, and given TOG's retorts, I'd need to in order to understand anything.
EVO, Search for Eden.
No, just no. I'm going to stop you right there. You think this game, and you are going to continue on to say that this game is controversial because it includes evolution, and the theory of evolution being portrayed very poorly.
Cool. Care to actually show us this, TOG, or are you just going to continue your point, cut in after the title, and debunk shit that we haven't seen or heard of? You're jumping the gun again to get to a point where it's not needed yet. No one knows what the crap you're addressing.
That's a lame excuse, especially when compared to the rape glorified hentai game that you put at number 10.
Oh? You mean that thing that they listed first and not actually put to a number? But details. I think the bigger issue that I have at this point is due to the fact that because you cut in when you did, no one would know why this is a lame excuse as to why it's controversial to play around the family, especially given some religious families. Also, once again, you're misrepresenting what Criminal Girls is actually about, and, more annoyingly, why Criminal Girls is on the list in the first place, being the creepy nature of the premise and lewd graphics. Compare that to a game with something as ideologically sensitive as EVO, Search for Eden, and even if this was numbered, one could make the argument that EVO would be slightly more controversial given its premise, and especially America's views on religion.
Monster Mon Piece. Imagine the world of Pokemon, but instead of cute monsters like Pikachu and Charmander,
and now that you've imagined Pokemon, imagine something completely different because this has nothing to do with Pokemon.
Cool. Now if we could only know what you mean by that because you cut in before they could show us what the game actually is about.
New best friend?
F, A Fairy Tale of the Two.
So, we have just straight up forgotten that we're talking about JRPGs at this point, haven't we?
Fucking again? This makes the third time in a row you cut off the gamer before we could see what you mean by it not being an RPG. TOG, learn to context.
We just have. This is no longer a list about JRPGs. Unless, of course, visual novels count as RPGs these days. You know those games that have no gameplay past choosing what to say and what path to follow?
Implying visual novels can't have actual gameplay aspects? Implying none do? I'm sorry, do you even Ace Attorney, Danganronpa, or Valhalla? I mean, yeah, they're the exception. Fine, if that's the hypothetical argument you wish to bring up, go ahead. But that wouldn't change the fact that there are visual novels with actual gameplay aspects to them. Hell, there are JRPGs that are also visual novels. So if in particular A Fairy Tale of the Two isn't a VNRPG, that's one thing, but don't go around acting as if they don't exist.
I know you talk about it having H scenes, and that's being distasteful, but you did also cover that they could be turned off, making that completely superfluous, really, at the end of the day.
But by default, the H scenes are there, right? The hentai scenes are still technically within the game, regardless of if you could turn them off or not, especially since, according to your target, you can only disable them at the beginning of the game, thus meaning if you pick it back up later, you'd be unable to turn them off. And according to the footage, they strongly recommend you keep them on, pressuring the player to keep them enabled. Having the option to turn them off doesn't really do you any good if you kept them on when you started playing.
And even when you get to the H scenes, they are so goddamn soft-core that they really shouldn't be called H scenes. Listen, if you want to choose something like a visual novel and throw it on this list because it's about RPGs, why not pick something like fucking Monster Girl Quest? Then I might have let it slide because at least then there are RPG-style battles in it. Why would you put a visual novel on a list of JRPGs?
You didn't just give an example of a Japanese visual role-playing game novel and then ask why someone would put a visual novel on a countdown about role-playing games. TOG, stop. Script. Please.
Oh no. Hyperdimension Neptunia.
Sweet Jesus. He apparently remembered this was last about JRPGs. I'm shocked, so we're actually going to let this one play out fully.
A slew of games, and each one is basically dedicated to fan service. Accomplish a goal? A woman dressed in very little will appear on the screen and do a celebration dance. Win a battle? Enjoy the jiggle of female body parts. The game series pretty much exploits women in an effort to please male gamers. Not only should you not play these sexist games in front of your parents, but you probably shouldn't touch the Hyperdimension Neptunia games at all. There are far better JRPGs to enjoy, and ones that do not make you feel so ashamed afterwards.
Okay. I will give you that fan service games aren't everyone's cup of tea. That's granted. This is forgetting that it actually has a very quirky and entertaining storyline, and really the gameplay is rather good and the characters are overall likable. Hell, the representative for the Nintendo Wii is a child with an extreme foul mouth. It's hilarious.
Yeah, that's great and all, but whoever wrote for the gamer doesn't think so, as given by their clear distaste for the series and even saying that there are better JRPGs to play than it. You're not doing anything to actually debunk the list here, you're merely stating an opinion that your target doesn't agree with. Subjectivity doesn't debunk subjectivity. Sorry.
And I will grant you that it breaks the rules of feminism they all apparently have to follow these days. Then let me ask this. Why is a game that your only real bad mark is the fan service higher on a list than a game that literally has you sleeping with the different female protagonist and a fairly poorly covers things like the subject of rape?
Because this list isn't organized.
Why is this higher on that list than Criminal Girls, that breaks almost every rule in the social justice handbook for making an acceptable video game?
Because this list isn't organized.
Your rules for numbering things makes no sense to me.
Gee, I wonder if it's because the list isn't organized.
And even more so tells me that you're using the whole feminist angle just to get more views by being a cool boy ally, because let's be honest, you're using them incorrectly.
The fuck you mean using it incorrectly? TOG, buddy, I don't get it. If the game doesn't match feminist ideals and would offend someone on that basis, I fail to see how exactly they're playing the feminist card incorrectly for views. Is it because it's out of nowhere? I mean, sure, it's a little jarring, doesn't particularly fit with the rest of the video, but even still, it's not wrong in the sense that someone could see it as exploiting women. Or objectifying them, considering they're literally designed based off of game consoles, but details. Alternatively, you could see it as incorrect because Criminal Girls isn't higher on the list despite it probably breaking more rules of feminism, and thus this would show that they're inconsistent with their feminist ideals, and thus showed an unintentional double standard to a game that's more explicit. But that would imply that you thought this list was organized, and that'd just be silly.
Toilet Kids.
Deep breath. Why the fuck is a toilet humor based top-down shooter doing on this list, let alone once again higher than Criminal Girls?
I'm not drunk enough for this.
Do you have any idea what the fuck you're talking about when you were writing this script?
At least they wrote one.
This is worse than any Josh Scorcher video ever made. And yeah, there's a dated callback reference for you.
You missed out.
Vandal Hearts 2.
Okay, a tactical strategy RPG, but whatever. At least it's a fucking RPG for once, so whatever.
Hearts 2. Released in 1999, the game features knights unlike you've ever seen before. Sword slashes, blood splatter, and village girls are kidnapped in front of your eyes. One glimpse at the opening scene, and your parents will witness blood, carnage, and countless dead bodies on the screen. The longer you play, the bloodier it gets, and all the violence takes place without even using a gun. Your parents will think that you have no heart when playing Vandal Hearts 2, as the goal is to pretty much kill everything on the screen in the quickest amount of time. Oh yeah, and there's a storyline in there somewhere as well.
So we're worried about gore and body counts. Yes, there was blood splatter in the game. Very cartoonish blood splatter. But really, games like Sweet Home on the Famicom are more gory than this.
Great, fantastic, love it, 10 out of 10. That wouldn't change the fact that Vandal Hearts 2 is still a gory game, though. Like, yeah, sure, if this was shooting for the worst of the worst, Sweet Home would probably make it on this list. But one, whoever wrote the video probably hasn't heard of Sweet Home, and two, even if they had, that wouldn't change the placement here, given that they think there is a lot of dead bodies and gore on the screen at once, thus making it a game that prudish family members who don't like violence would have a problem with.
Hello, this is SeganFan1983 here with a brief announcement. After much deliberation, I have come to the conclusion that had my Orion 2 not been taken away on behalf of X-Wings in 1999, that I would not have said a peep about the whole Confused Matthew and Super Godzilla 12 versus the Lion King fiasco.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but are you meaning to tell me that you're bringing up 2013 drama because of something that happened in 1999? Or alternatively, are you saying that you're talking about a 2013 drama because an account that you had from 1999 was shut down? Either way, are you sure talking about a 4-year-old drama is really something people will give a shit about? Especially since I remember your commentary on cancer, you had said that you don't wish to be remembered for that drama. Hell, later in this video you imply, actually no, you straight up say that a commentary on this video is a declaration of war, meaning you don't want anyone to dwell on it. Yet you're continuing to bring it up years later, not just here, but in the video on cancer too. But we'll return to this later.
Hey, SG-12. My being harshly critical of your hatred of the Lion King was nothing to get all worked up over, and not worth creating that bandwagon over either. I have a video containing surviving evidence linking Super Godzilla 12 in particular to that bandwagon linked below in the description box.
Okay, and? Has anyone said the 2013 bandwagon on you was not based on Super Godzilla 12? Has anyone really said that? Because hearing you talk about the Lion King, that's all we ever hear about. That's all we can see and hear from you. We know this spawned off that. However, that doesn't mean he was alone. What about Evil Brosif? He certainly had a hand in your bandwagoning. What about yourself for responding as much as you did? Don't think I don't know about the Joshua Tree amount of responses you did to practically all your detractors, most of which you can see in commentaries on those responses.
Now you're talking.
Now, with that out of the way, the only reason I got so angry at Confused Matthew and Super Godzilla 12's irrational hatred of the Lion King as to say something about it was not just that it was faulty or even that they were merely beating people over the head with it. It was because it was at times violent. I ripped on SG-12 for running off and getting hog wild with a review that was not only faulty, but said terrible things like this.
Someone needs to eat this thing. Instead of beating his ass for this and going back to sleep like they rightly should have, his father obliges him and takes him on a tour of the kingdom. I'll mess your face up, you little shit. But since we don't like Simba, and we didn't know Mufasa very well, it's just really hard to care about this in any way except just generally.
Jokes! Motherfucking jokes! Yes, violent jokes, but they're not meant to be... Who am I kidding? It's Orion. There's no such thing as a joke to him. Alright, well, let's use Orion's own logic to sit here and explain why he's a Riri who constantly gets beat over the head with a textbook explaining why he's too slow on the draw. Orion, even if Super Godzilla 12 and Confused Matthew meant what they said and wished violence upon Simba, I don't know if you noticed this or not, is a fictional character. It's not like it hurt any real lions in the making of an animated fucking film. Even by your own logic, I don't get why this is such a big whoop for you. Actually, I do, but we'll keep this in mind for just a little later. Now, to clarify myself early, Orion, I don't care that you dislike the violent nature of their reviews. Whatever, that's your opinion, and opinions are subjective. At the end of the day, you cannot disprove a subjective statement. Unfortunately, we'll also have to come back to this later, so I'll save the elaboration for then.
You do realize that talking like that is a red flag in a review, and is just asking for trouble, so it is best not to do it.
Why? I really don't wish to play the elaboration card, but seriously. Why is that a red flag? I don't understand. People play up anger for laughs all the fucking times and no one except you seems to bat an eye.
Even if this beat-up Simba talk were a joke, it was still unfunny and cruel. And Simba being the fictional character that he is does not change the fact that it was immature, unwise, punitive, inexcusable, and direct provocation to talk like that.
It's later. Hey, Orion, it's well and good and all that you think that what they said was immature and childish. However, why can't you just leave it at that? Why did you have to set up this crusade against everyone who was against the Lion King at the time? I legit do not understand. Like, you've gone out of your way to call out anyone who just simply responds to you in a joking manner, even out of being part of this giant thing against you that barely anyone even remembers anymore. And fuck, even this will be important later. Actually, the only other point I have to make against Orion's video comes up in Turfy's video, which, while I would cover that now, Orion actually does a proper commentary on them, so because I don't get enough of this, let me just cover Orion's second video in the chain, but re-edit so Durfy's video takes up the whole screen when they show up, and I can hit them then. So, before we even get into the video, Orion wants me to read his description, and whoo, boy, we got some salt mining to do here. So, let me just get the general points out of the way. Looking at the description of the video, I get the idea that you aren't aware of the different ways an opinion can be delivered, or even what an opinion is. Well, let us go look at the definition to give you a bit of an English lesson. Oh look, a view or judgment formed about something not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. Thinking that a fictional character should be beat up because they're an annoying little shit is an opinion. A brash one? Yeah. A violent one? Sure. And yeah, you could even call it a childish one, but it's still an opinion. Want to know how I can confirm this? By the fact that you disagree with it in an emotional manner like you are here. You're not using facts, you're using subjectivity and emotions. Therefore, an opinion. But once again, we'll save elaboration for later.
By the way, accepting differences of opinion does not mean accepting irrational, bigoted, or violent opinions. I fucking hate the opinion excuse, which is used to justify things like irrational hatred, ignorance, and violence, since it is annoying and is meant to shut down any valid criticism.
What? Well, no, Orion, not agreeing with an opinion is not agreeing with an opinion. They still have the right to have said opinion. The only way that you could really argue that opinion and seem viable is by using facts to argue those said opinions. You know, facts. That thing that you would want to start using if you want to be seen as an intellectual that can actually be taken seriously, instead of that faggot who valiantly fought over a fucking Disney movie.
I wasn't going to make this video.
Durfee, how nice of you to join us. Actually, why are you here if you didn't want to make this video? Like, you could simply not do the video and move on with life. Do you realize how many videos I do that with a day?
Alright, so I'm going to apologize to literally everyone here. Yes, this is a video on Orion, again, because they decided to do something stupid again.
What I did that you are responding to was not stupid. You are just missing the point and avoiding the issue here.
Okay, first, Orion, them thinking you did something stupid is not them missing the point. That's gonna be later in the video. Here, they just thought you bringing up the Lion King drama from 2013 and 2017 after your Orion 2 count was shut down by some X-Wing fuck was stupid. And honestly, it is. You're digging up old drama that the majority of the commentary community has in fact stepped away from. It's one of the few things in my last video on you I still agree with.
And you know what? I was going to let it go. I was going to let it go. I was going to let Orion do his own thing and just leave it at that. He doesn't like the Confused Matthew review. He's still vehemently defending The Lion King. He's still vehemently trying to rip Confused Matthew's review of The Lion King down and the review of Titan AE and all this other bullshit. And it was nothing new. In fact, this is nothing new.
Hey, Deturfy, I was not still trying to rip on Confused Matthew. I stopped commentating Confused Matthew in March 2016, and now have my final cut commentaries on the guy in archive on Dailymotion. The only Titan-related problem regarding this witch hunt is bashing me for my legitimate hatred of that movie, while demanding that I blindly respect a faulty hatred of The Lion King, which is just flat-out double standards.
You know what? Orion is right here. I mean, I don't know the full context of the Titan AE thing. Oh, wait, yeah, I do. But it is quite the double standard to harangue on Orion for having his own dislike for Titan AE, but expect him to just ignore Confused Matthew's hatred of the Lion King. But now comes the issues. Orion, first of all, you are still harking on Confused Matthew and Super Godzilla 12. If you weren't, the first video wouldn't have happened. With that said, why is it okay for you to still be on about the whole Lion King fiasco, but it's not okay for people to still be on your case for similar reasons regarding Titan AE? Is that too not a double standard of which can be pointed out? Or is it okay when you do it because people will harass and bully you and call you out on your own bullshit because if you want to pull the ladder up, I have unfortunate news for you. It's not. If people are making stupid points, they're making stupid points, people will call them out. That's just what commentators do, Orion. Now, Deturfy, I'm keeping your "this is nothing new" spiel bookmarked for later, because when we get to part 3, this is going to bite you in the furry behind.
But part of it is just because I want to make a point. Around the 2-minute 50-second mark, Orion had this to say.
I will consider any commentary on or other response to this video defending anti-Simba violence an act of war and flag it down for harassment and bullying. It isn't that I cannot take criticism, it is that I'm sick and tired of being hounded with this very specific set of shit that says that violent, irrational hatred is okay, and I have far more pressing matters to attend to.
Alright, as I said, I had something to say here too. More pressing matters. Right. Because making in a nutshell videos where you basically mock a political YouTuber you disagree with without understanding their actual viewpoint, talking about how American football pushes us to war while you may as well be wearing a tinfoil hat, or even flagging down videos that respond to a video that's admittedly even subpar for yourself is clearly more pressing matters that you must step away from your white knighting of a fucking children's cartoon.
I got nothing new, right? But the issue that I have with this is the issue that I have with it every single time. It's not harassment. It's not bullying. It's a different opinion that you are vehemently arguing against.
I think you're missing the point, Turfy. Yeah, Orion is valiantly defending the Lion King, but for people to get on his case every time it's mentioned could be seen as dogpiling, which according to the legal dictionary is a form of harassment. And given your intent, which we'll get to later, can be seen as bullying in the actual dictionary. Now, before someone brings up, oh, you're using two different dictionaries, you're totally right, I am. The actual dictionary definition is vague on what is and is not harassment, so I needed something a bit more elaborated. Fucking fight me in the parking lot.
It was harassment and bullying, since people like you made endless complaints in videos, journals, etc. about me and my work over this one issue, kind of like how the vegan spammer has been sending endless comments to the Dark Reindeer. And you do realize I fucking hate the opinion excuse with the purple passion, and you're saying that this is about difference of opinion is a good example of that opinion cop-out.
Alright, there's one thing right and two things wrong. Let's go through, shall we? Alright, technically just making videos on you isn't harassment on its own. At least, not if it's one or two videos. Now, yeah, with as many people who made videos on you with the intent to get a rise out of you, yeah, by the definition I pulled up, could be harassment from a group. Congrats, the broken clock was half right. However, again, overall, just making a video on you is not, especially if it's to explain that what you're doing in that current time is stupid. Now let me touch on your opinion hatred. An opinion is an opinion. The purpose of an opinion is to explain how you feel towards something, whereas the reasons they have their opinions are based in a more logical area that you can touch on. But in this case, you don't. And in turn, it just seems like you are valiantly wanting people to agree with your own onion, which, in case it hasn't been stressed enough, doesn't work, you onion broadcast.
And it's not that anyone is agreeing with Confused Matthew saying that, yeah, it's okay to beat up Simba, because no one is saying that. I liked The Lion King. But I'm not gonna get mad at Confused Matthew's review on Lion King because he wants to beat up Simba or some shit, because it's a review. It's an exaggeration over the context or over his major issue with the Lion King, that being that Simba is a little shit. And love it or hate it in the beginning, in the first half of it, yeah, he kind of is.
Turfy, look, I'm not arguing with you here. Orion actually does a fairly good job at that himself here. But I do have something to point out to you. I can tell you aren't scripting this. You're stammering over your words a lot and it's kind of distracting. This kind of ties into my overall thoughts on the matter, but we'll get there when we get there. To give you a bit of a hint, someone from your past has got some words for you.
New best friend?
Even if the talk about beating up Simba were an exaggeration and done for a review, it was still a wrong choice to talk like that.
Which you won't explain why.
Many people made commentaries and rants, etc. on Confused Matthew's Lion King reviews, refuting all of his arguments and claims about the movie to death, with or without my say on the matter.
Okay, sure. Good for them and good for you. Problem is, you aren't saying their points are wrong. You're saying that they shouldn't have been a bunch of meanie butts in business pants towards a joking facade meant to play up and exaggerate how much they don't like Simba as a character. Meaning in this particular context, it doesn't matter how much these other unnamed and not cited sources are correct on how much Confused Matthew was incorrect, because that isn't the conversation we're having. That said though, Turfy, try to get back on track too, buddy, because you're drifting off for no reason.
Orion, this bandwagon isn't going to stop as long as you continue to bring it up. The only reason why people haven't been giving you shit as of recent is because most of us didn't realize you came back.
Oh, so does the Turfy. I do a video on Orion and still most people don't know Orion existed. Shows how much I'm loved. I'm taking my ball and going home. Alright, but jokes aside, allow me to point out something. You're making it seem like the whole community has this big vendetta against Orion to the point just knowing he exists will get us commentators itching to toss him down on the ground for loose change. That paints a bad picture on you and everyone else in this community you associate with. Stop that. From my experience in covering dead topics, people won't normally turn into a bandwagon because the bandwagon didn't learn the first time. Except when it's Joshua, for some reason. Then it turns into a large tree that eventually gets people to tell Joshua to stop doing videos altogether. Look, the point is, assuming why everyone doesn't just go back to covering Orion like that, and especially with that mindset in mind, really makes us look like a bunch of irrationally toxic fucks, and we already have to deal with that kind of stigma enough.
You want all this shit to go away? You want this drama to stop? You want this bandwagon to stop? Then stop. You are the problem, Orion. Not the people commentating on you, not the people responding to you, not the people disagreeing with you. You are. Because each and every single time someone says something disagreeing with you, you have to argue it every single time. The common thread in all of this shit is you.
Oh boy, we get to the part where I decided this has gotten bad. Turfy, do you want to know what the definition for bullying is? To use superior strength or influence to intimidate someone, typically to force him or her to do what one wants. You saying that this bandwagon will keep going as long as Orion just exists or talks about something from his past to look in retrospect is kind of an intimidation tactic used to get Orion to stop talking about these things. Especially when you are sitting there and pinning all of the blame on his bandwagoning on him. Oh, but Doodle, didn't you do that in your retrospective of Gym of 99? I figure this argument's going to be pulled up because this exact same argument was pulled up against that video, but in reference for my distaste for Ernie's follow-up video to his try-out I covered. And if you'll allow me to actually address that, I'm going to go kind of a bit on a tangent, but it'll come back to this hypothetical argument, trust me. First of all, let me get the From the Time Machine example out of the way. There's actually a few aspects of that video that people miss that negates the hypocrisy card. One of the big ones being, I don't blame absolutely everything on Jim. I get on Henry's audio and his use of opinions to attempt to validate opinions, and I blame the general agreed upon ideas that Jim spouts at the point that I stopped covering that caused them both to get angry. These are things that Henry was at fault for, and while I do blame most of it on Jim, that's because, fuck, it's Jim's video. It's not like it was Ernie's project where Ernie was kind of the leader of that. On top of that, there's more to blame on Jim in his video because a lot of Henry's points boil down to, it's disgusting, whereas Jim actually gave various shit arguments in the video which took up about half the video. Whereas in his video with Chirprox and Ernie, Jim only appeared like, what, 7, maybe 8 times within the whole video? Hell, there's a joke based on that where Jim goes to get chicken and comes back with a chicken bucket on his head when he re-enters the video. Gee, it's almost like pinning most of the blame on the guy who does the least in the video is a bad idea. And finally, look at the intent of the videos. Ernie's follow-up was to disown his video and take responsibility for a shit project, only to then go and pin most of the blame on Jim, whereas my retrospective was just to look back and do a commentary on an old video to find out the general reason why the video in question was garbage. So to answer Kuromi's question on that video, there you go. Now to address the inevitable hypocrite comment from this video. Aside from the fact that, again, I did address quite a bit of Henry's faults in From the Time Machine, the bandwagon had less become Orion's response to Super Godzilla 12 and Confused Matthew's review of The Lion King and became the Orion broadcast tree, which, just like the Joshua tree of last year, became an absolute shitshow due to the fact that it was a singular person people thought overall was shit, responding to that person to get them to squirm and admit to being wrong, which in turn put everyone who responded to the Orion broadcast in seriousness just to see him respond just as in the wrong as he was, whether they thought it was funny or no. Yeah, to be honest, the whole 2013 bandwagon, while yeah, spawned a lot of memes, anyone who kept arguing with Orion to get him to admit that he was wrong was as in the wrong as he was for responding to it, because as shown before, it's bullying by definition. You want him to stop talking about those issues he's having and will hearken him for doing so just on that basis. To clarify, those who trolled him were just doing what trolls do, and while yeah, there does get to be a point it gets ridiculous, they obviously don't care, and at that point it does kind of just become the person who's being trolled to ignore them. I'm talking about legit responses, like Turfy's here that tries to get him to not do what he's doing. When it gets to be a bandwagon on a person because it's that person and not because of a singular bad video they made, it's on either party's heads because they're the ones who are responding to one another, causing the problem to grow out of control, and it's on either party to just let it go and move on. Kind of what I implied in my video on the entirety of the Joshua tree. Does that make sense? Also, Turfy, because I'm still not done with your point yet, your point can be applied directly back at you and can be as equally valid. You want Orion to stop responding to his critics of his videos? Then stop giving him stuff to respond to. The minute you do that is the minute he doesn't do it. This would be the point where I tell you to try again, but at that point I'd just be contradicting myself.
Sorry, Charlie, I am not the problem here. It is people like you who though have the choice not to respond to me, but choose to anyway because you're so pissed off at me for not accepting someone's irrational and unjust opinion.
Look, I just got onto their case about pinning the blame on the opposing side. Don't make me do that with you too. You are as in the wrong as they are. Shut up.
And I dare you. I fucking dare you to try flagging this video for bullying and harassment and tell me how that goes.
Newsflash, defending and trying to justify a violent, irrational hatred, especially with something like a bandwagon, is bullying.
No, getting on your case about just every video you do is bullying. Getting onto your case about a singular video you do is not. Sorry, it's also not justifiable under YouTube's terms of service to attempt to flag any of those videos down. Look, Orion, I ain't defending Turfy on the subject either, but you are equally as retarded here, buddy.
Now you're talking.
And if you don't want people expressing their opinions on your work, publicly or privately for that matter, don't share it.
Hooray, another force argument telling me not to share my work online if I do not want to put up with your shit, though in a coded message.
You know, I could give you the first time you use that, given that is kind of what they implied there, but here they're just giving you basic logic 101. You don't want people to point out flaws in your video? Don't make a video. People will have the ability to critique what you put out there as long as it's out there, no matter where you put it. You don't have to listen to it, you don't have to agree, but if you honestly don't want criticism at all, keep what you think and what you make to yourself, plain and simple.
The internet, or saying it's the internet, is no excuse whatsoever to be a dick rag, and you, Turfy, are being a dick rag.
I mean, I agree, Turfy is kind of being a dick rag, but that aside, I do have something to say overall. Threatening to flag down videos that agree with you because you see it as an act of war certainly puts you in a hypocritical position. Especially since you straight out say that you're going to do that in your first video. You're kind of threatening people with the flagging to silence them. Kind of like you're accusing Turfy here of doing for just making a video on you. Also, ironically, Turfy being a dick rag is subjective, because in their eyes, obviously they're not being one as demonstrated by their warped logic. And using this logic, I can call you flagging down videos that respond to you as being a dick rag too, as that would just be subjective on my part. And hey, just because it's the internet, right, Orion?
Because that is my right, and you aren't taking that away. You want us to respect your opinions? That's great. You can start by respecting everyone else's, including Confused Matthews. You don't have to like it, but you can at the very least respect it. You want this cycle to end? Then you have to be the one to break it, not us.
You do not have the right to endlessly respond to me with petty complaints in videos, journals, etc., since that is fucking annoying and as bad as spamming, if not worse.
But it's okay when you do it towards everyone else. Okay. Since Orion's final thoughts would just have me repeat the exact same bullshit as before, Part 3! Turfy alone. Let us commence. Now, for fairness, let me read Turfy's description before we get involved in the video. After all, they put please read in the description, so let's do so. Oh, and we see a bunch of thoughts in the description that don't at all match up with either the last video I touched on or the video we're about to touch on. Isn't that wonderful? Now, nothing really in the description is incorrect except maybe this part. And even then, I only halfway see it as a problem, given that, yeah, Orion flagging down videos are a direct violation of free speech when the videos in question don't violate YouTube's terms of service. However, saying it cannot be harassment not only A, addresses only half of what Orion was putting out there, because harassment and bullying aren't exactly under the same thing, but can bounce off of one another, but it also B, can be harassment as stated earlier by definition, given that this is unwanted or annoying attention from a group or party to Orion at this point. But want to know the most beautiful thing? Even by your own definition, you're wrongly assuming Orion's intent by stating that he's both wanting and willing. Because what did you state at the very beginning of your previous video on the matter?
I wasn't going to make this video.
I wasn't going to make this video. Meaning, I didn't really want to. But you did anyway because you felt obligated to, right? Is that a correct assumption to make? Because if it's not, I can use self-destructing Mudhole as an example of how people can make videos because they feel like they have to due to being trapped in a corner. Which, while yes, Orion wasn't, doesn't invalidate my point given that he may feel he can clarify better in other videos and feels the need to do so. So even by your own definition and actions, it can be harassment, just under very specific circumstances, which interestingly enough, you might just fall under depending on how Orion feels in this specific circumstance. If he feels obligated to, then congrats, you're harassing him by your own definition. Good job. Now let's get into the video.
Well, that was fast. I think this must be a new record within the hour. Orion posted a response to my video on him, which is, you know, absolutely beautiful because he kind of just missed the point of everything that I said and, you know, inserted his own thoughts as to what I said. This is what I love. He doesn't actually argue against me. What he does is he kind of just makes this poor imaginary version of me and then argues against that.
It's funny because you aren't at all going to play his video to prove that's the case. Grant you, you no longer need to because I hit both those videos. What can I say except you're welcome?
I'm not going to do a commentary on the entire thing because honestly there's no fucking point. It's a waste of time. Orion isn't going to listen. He hasn't listened since 2013.
Whew, how'd that ass treating you, Durf? Is it hard to sit down? Okay, let me explain. So there was this thing I bookmarked earlier of DeTurfy saying that it's all the same, it's never changed.
And all this other bullshit, and it was nothing new. In fact, this is nothing new.
Yet they still sit there and do what amounts to a long ranty one-shot on Orion to try to get it through his thick noggin that it's all his fault. Even though I'd argue that's stupid, but whatever, we get the gist of that by now. So why is it only now a waste of your time that you're not going to deal with? Why is it only now not worth doing? And that's not even mentioning the fact that if it's not worth your time, why respond at all? In this instance or your last one. That's just about as logical as saying, I don't care about those haters that I'm totally going to address.
But I'm gonna hit a few points. One, he says I'm triggered. No, Ryan, I'm not triggered. You are. Apparently, he thinks I'm triggered because I rebelled against him because he wasn't going to respect a violent, irrational opinion. Never mind the fact that, 1, it was a joke. 2, it was a joke. 3, it was a joke. It was literally just a line of dialogue to entertain an audience. That is it. If you didn't find it funny, Orion, that's fine. You didn't have to. We aren't saying that you have to find it funny. We're not saying that.
It was a joke. Humor is a subjective medium. That's all you need.
God, DeTurfy, it's hard to tell when you're joking when your tone is a singular, "Rawr, you're wrong," throughout the whole goddamn thing. Sure, I'm no master of comedy, but I at least try to put in a shred of emotion into my stuff. Orion probably couldn't tell you were joking because you sounded so goddamn serious throughout the video.
Now you're talking.
What else did he say? Oh yes, he was mad because I'm quote-unquote making him do all the work and ending this bandwagon on him because, what was it that he said? I'm mentally lazy or some shit? Yeah, no, that's not what I'm doing, Orion. You are right about one thing. I am making you do all the work. Because it's your problem.
Oh, Ryan, I'm not telling you to do all the work. I'm just telling you to do all the work. DeTurfy, why? Even scriptless, how do you not see such a quick and blatant contradiction to your own statement? I mean, even if you just left it at, no, that's not what I'm doing, you'd still be wrong because, no, that's exactly what you were doing, and we saw it in this video alone, but no, you admit to doing that shortly after saying that's not what you were doing. Good God.
It's not my job to fix your shit. It is not my job to put the brakes on all the videos that are being done on you. It is not my job to get on my knees and bow down to you and say you're right and I'm wrong.
Well, no, it's not inherently your job, but at this point it's not inherently Orion's job either. Have I gotten that point across yet? I feel like I haven't gotten that point across yet. I'll go ahead and for the sake of not driving home the same point anymore until the end, I'll skip any point that I've already covered to death. Which, spoiler alert, is half of DeTurfy's video.
I have personal experience in Doodletones. I have dealt with shit like this. I have been on your side of the equation. And I'm telling you how to solve the problem. I'm not telling you that you have to do this, but the best way to solve the problem is to stop. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that everyone who has commentated up to this point has been bullying you, has been harassing you. I don't believe that's the case, but you know what? Again, for the sake of argument, let's just say that they were. What is the one thing that they beat into your head in grade school? You don't want them to bother you anymore? Don't give them the attention. If all of us are really just big old nasty bullies, then all this is doing, all these responses, all these commentaries that you're doing on us, is doing nothing more than feeding us.
In this make-believe world where we are bullies, all that means for you is that you're playing right into our hands.
Except when you just come right out of the blue and commentate on them for the sake of commentating on them, right, DeTurfy? What's it at that point? Yeah, now I'm a hypocrite here, but in Orion's defense, he ignored my first video on him. Whether or not he knew it existed is not the point. The point is he didn't respond, he ignored it, and it went away. Then like, I don't know, almost a whole year later, you come back and hit him simply because, oh hey, you're talking about dead drama. It's almost as if the bully got bored of being bored and came back to give the nerd another swirly. Or in the case here, it's the nerd coming to pick on another nerd because he knows how it feels to be picked on. Oh, sorry, is this other picked on nerd just a little too on the nose now? Fake's fight against the dead bandwagon you helped jumpstart aside, just because you know how it feels to be in that hot seat to Turfy, doesn't make it okay for you to help re-spark old 2013 drama for the sake of re-sparking old 2013 drama. At least my video on Sagan Fan was me telling him that he took a joke video unrelated to the bandwagon seriously and then moved on with my life. Post-doodle here. To Turfy, just because you were also a bandwagon at one point doesn't make it okay for you to continue Orion's bandwagon and straight up intimidate him into being quiet and dictating speech. I don't know how I didn't catch that until now, but you bringing up how you've been there doesn't really do anything here but try to justify intimidation towards Orion. Like, I was there too, buddy. That doesn't mean I'm gonna go around and intimidate, say, I don't know, Kablam into never talking about Mr. Inter ever again. I'd advise he shouldn't, because he's proven he can't be rational about the guy, but he'd still have the right to do so.
And you don't see that. But what I find absolutely gorgeous is that you expect us to solve your problems. You expect us to simply stop making videos on you. That's not going to happen, Orion.
I mean, it happened with Meta until I came around. It happened with Ben the Looney until I came around. It happened to Joshua 8428 until I came around. It happened with Sean Sampson until I came around. Hell, it didn't even happen to Orion himself until I came around. And again, outside of Joshua, all still haven't re-became bandwagons. So why couldn't it happen? Because people now know Orion exists? Because Orion exists? Because Orion still talks about his thoughts on the old Lion King thing? Or rather, once talked about his thoughts on the old Lion King thing? Where does the line get drawn, Durf? And to keep my promise, I'm skipping the rest of them, repeating the same points against Orion over and over again, because that's pretty much the rest of the video has to offer.
The Inexperienced Spy is a spell card from the starter deck Kaiba, and Kaiba Evolution, interestingly enough. Select and see one card in your opponent's hand. Why?
Well, at the time of this card's release, the game was new, and knowing what your opponent had in hand could have benefited you depending on the circumstance. And yeah, nowadays we have cards like DD Designator and Mind Crush, which makes the Inexperienced Spy just as much more useful, as you would be able to know which card to declare in your opponent's hand to get rid of it. In other words, giving you a free out.
Why do I only want to see one of your cards? I want to see everything. I mean, I get the flavor. Like, it's a stupidly flavorful card. It's a noob spy. I get it. He's doing terrible at his job. But this isn't Magic the Gathering. This is fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! Flavor isn't that strong in Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyways. And the fact of the matter is, this card is crap. I'm sorry. Like, do I really need to explain why this card is shit?
Actually, you do, because surprise, surprise, not that many people know Yu-Gi-Oh! And yes, I am referring to people who actually play Yu-Gi-Oh!
Never mind the fact that there are so many cards in the game that allow you to see the entirety of your opponent's hands. Most players don't even care about these kinds of cards anyways.
Never mind the fact that those came out long after the Inexperienced Spy. Hell, this complaint ignores the fact Starter Deck Kaiba came out even before the first booster set. Internationally, of course, but my point still stands.
If you've played Yu-Gi-Oh! Long enough, you'll realize that most players run the exact same kinds of cards in their main deck, especially if you're running against an archetype. So for example, if you're going against Cosmos or Monarchs, you know damn well many of the key cards that they run. So if you have Mind Crush, chances are you already know what's in their hand. It's made especially easy if they tutor stuff.
Alright, John, let's use this logic here a bit, shall we? Well, yeah, against most decks you would know what they already have in their hand at certain times throughout the duel. But wouldn't it be better to be that much more certain? The Inexperienced Spy is a card that allows you to be 100% certain that you know at least one card in their hand. Whee!
If you thought I was done discussing your opponent's hands, you are wrong. A Naveting Miss, I'm sure that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, is a continuous trap card.
Goody, we get to talk about this again.
The card's effect is stupidly simple. Your opponent's hand size limit becomes 5. There, I screwed them over, guys. I completely screwed over their strategy. They can't hold 6 cards anymore. Now they can only hold 5. Yes, I'm totally gonna win.
Well, alright, let's go into a little bit more detail from the video that I did on Dustin Smith, particularly around the card Spatial Collapse. Limiting your opponent's hand size to 5 limits what it is they'll have to play, limiting them to exactly 5 cards at most in one turn, excluding searches and extra draws. With smart timing using Spatial Collapse, you can then limit how much they could play at a total to 5 cards on the field. Sure, you also do limit yourself, but the fact of the matter is you can hurt your opponent this way, which I feel is what counts here. Also, even though this video came out before what I'm about to mention, I still feel like this is relevant, but I can also point out to the recent ban of Kaiser Coliseum that this is another option for limiting your opponent's field very akin to what it is Kaiser Coliseum did. Again, doesn't much count for anything as far as this video is concerned, but it's something to bring up just on the off chance you still think this card is bad.
Is the sarcasm getting to you guys? What do you want me to say about this card? I don't know anyone who's ever played this card. I'm not lying. I don't think I've ever seen a living human being actually play this card in a duel.
But that doesn't at all mean these people don't exist. Hell, for quite some time, Empty Jar was a thing. And this card was used in said Empty Jar deck, but I guess that don't count because you personally haven't seen it. It's a budgeted way to force your opponent to have an extra dead card that they'll be forced to discard if they choose not to play it.
And that's crazy. Okay, if this card said your opponent's hand size limit becomes the current one -1, that would make sense. Like, it would shrink the hand size the more of these traps you had on the field. So if I had 3 of these miss cards, guess what? Their hand size would be a 3. That would be a much better card than what we have now.
Sure, I guess you got me on that end, but you forget when this card came out. This came out during the early stages of Yu-Gi-Oh!, specifically October of 2004 in the TCG. To remind you of what time that was, Yada-Lock was just taken off the competitive grid and Exodia FTK was taking over. We got rid of a deck that forced your opponent out of a hand and continued forcing them out of a draw. A card like the Angry John's Innervating Mist, at least for at the time that the card came out, would have brought back the annoyance that was not having a hand worth a damn, after we just got rid of it earlier that year. And that's not mentioning the awful combos you would have been able to do with Time Sealed and shortly after Drop Off.
I mean, just 5? Seriously? Late game, that's not even gonna matter. Unless your opponent has insane draw power, who cares? Even if you drew this at the very first turn of the duel, who cares? Your opponent is more likely gonna set most of their hand anyways. It's just, why? Why does this card even exist?
Because hand advantage was everything in 2004. May I remind you of some of the hand-oriented cards that came out the exact same set as Innervating Mist?
Was the hand limit such a big deal? I just don't get it. Like, there's a card known as Silent Wooby that shrinks the opponent's hand size to 3. Isn't that a better option?
Sure, if you wanted to give your opponent a level 4 monster which they can XE summon along with 2,000 life points, whereas you draw 1 card and temporarily limit their hand size to 3. And that's even taking out the fact that Silent Wobby came out nearly a decade after Innervating Mist, making it where you're basically saying a card is bad because a card that came out after it is better. Nevertheless, the effect of Silent Wobby isn't even a guaranteed downside to your opponent, as if they get rid of Silent Wobby by the end of the turn, the hand limit won't take effect. Combine that with the fact that they gain 2,000 life points and get a level 4 monster on their side of the field, of which they can use for virtually anything they want, it could potentially be, at minimum, a +3 to your opponent, whereas Innervating Mist could even itself out. Anyway, we're skipping to your next card because all you do is bitch about Innervating Mist being a rare, which isn't a complaint at all.
Sand Gambler. Oh, Jesus. Really? Pierre, what the hell are you doing here? Why'd you remove your glasses? Anywho, Sand Gambler is a light level 3 spellcaster monster with 300 attack points and 1600 defense points. His effect is simple. Toss a coin 3 times. If all 3 results are heads, destroy all monsters on your opponent's side of the field. If all 3 results are tails, destroy all monsters on your side of the field. You can only activate this effect once per turn during your main phase. Are you guys good at math? No? It's okay, I'll help you out. If you toss a coin 3 times and they all land on heads, that's a 1 in 8 chance. That's because the probability of getting heads on a coin flip is 50%. And if you add an additional heads every time, the odds decrease. And as you can see, I did my math. It results in a 1 in 8 chance. And that's pretty crummy.
Let's see, card called Sand Gambler forces you to gamble and doesn't even penalize you that much for losing. Issues with this card? Aside from the luck aspect and low attack, which this card isn't even alone with, I really see no advert issues with the card.
But then again, you also have a 1 in 8 chance of the card completely backfiring and killing all your monsters. So, you follow me? Yeah, in other words, 75% of the time this card does fucking nothing. I mean, really? A card that does nothing 75% of the time.
Could always be a card that does shit all 100% of the time, or be a card that hurts you more than it helps. Having a chance to even do something or put yourself at an advantage, no less, is better than not. At least as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! Is concerned.
Are you fucking kidding me? I mean, I understand that Raigeki may have been banned around this time this card was made, but come on! We had Time Wizard!
Yes, we had a card that had a 50% chance of helping or hurting you with no other option like Sand Gambler gives you. Look, I won't deny Time Wizard is awesome if you get its effect to work in your favor, and with the combined help of second coin toss, it makes it a lot easier to do so. But the issue with Time Wizard is it's a 50-50 split and the negatives really outweigh the positives. With Sand Gambler, the negatives are you either do nothing but become cannon fodder, and that's taking out the fact that you can use Honest or some back row card to keep your Sand Gambler up, or you have a small chance to blow up your side of the field. Time Wizard's negatives are much more extreme as not only you blow your field up, but you also take damage from it. So how is Time Wizard better than Sand Gambler? The probability of positives?
Gate Guardian, oh Jesus.
Actually, I'll be skipping the Gate Guardian section because honestly, Angry John makes a very valid point here, and to be honest, Gate Guardian is actually a really shit card no matter where you look at it, being what is essentially a vanilla beatstick that requires effectively better cards to bring it out. And while yeah, I could essentially bring up the potential OTKs this card does open up, and even the historical relevancy of this card, Angry John basically brings up the fact that you can use Kazujin, Suijin, and Sangha for much better cards via Xe summoning, so there's really no debate for me here. That said, I will come back to this later in the video.
Last card on the list is Shield Spear. Target one face-up monster in the field. It gains 400 attack and defense points until the end phase. So, in case you want a much weaker version of Reinforcement, Castle Wall, the Immortal Guardian, and Rush Recklessly, this card is yours.
Oh, so you do know how to properly compare cards to other cards. Where the hell was this during the Inexperienced Buy and Innervating Mist segments? Now, as for your explanation as to why Shield Spear's garbage, it checks out. Though I could get on your case about some of the examples you bring up for better cards that came out later, and I think I made that point earlier, so I'll skip the explanation, as there's more to be said here.
Now, I know what some of you might be saying. Hey, this card must have come out in 2003. I mean, that's a little too harsh. That's true, except that cards get bad over time while cards were shit to begin with.
Now, I can also technically give you this point, but allow me to get on my soapbox again. With how often the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Changes set to set, the strategies of old become outdated, and in one's eyes it can make set cards bad. But what people don't realize is that the strategies being old doesn't mean you can't still use them to the fullest extent and potentially modernize them to match the ever-evolving game. A deck like Volcanic Heroes were hit, and now people don't see them being as good as they were back then. Same with Shadels and Zectors, and to a lesser extent Cleaforts. And yeah, maybe in tournament play they aren't the tier 1 decks they used to be, but that doesn't mean they're unplayable piles of shit that can absolutely do nothing in the metagame, which is actually the problem with a lot of these terrible Yu-Gi-Oh! Card lists. They do not take into account the modernization of strategies that can be built around these cards and just assumes that because these cards are old and that there are better cards out now, that these cards are not by themselves options of playability. I'll come back to this in the final thoughts, but this is definitely something that should be taken into account with future lists. Oh yeah, we're not done with the video. You still have an episode 2 for me to cover.
Well, now we move on to other cards. Thank goodness. How about we start with Goblin Out of the Frying Pan? Unfortunately, the person who posted this request, I couldn't find his comment anymore, but yeah, we'll go with it. Goblin Out of the Frying Pan. It's a counter trap that allows you to pay 500 points to negate a spell card and return that spell card into the owner's hand. Okay, obviously you want to use this card against players who use spells that have heavy costs. For example, Magical Stone Excavation would force the opponent to discard 2 additional cards if their card got negated, or they would have to wait a turn before they get a chance to use it again. Or what if you know your opponent uses something with a heavy life point cost? That means that they would have to use it again and pay even more life points. But that's when you start to realize the majority of Yu-Gi-Oh! Players now don't really run cards that have heavy costs like this anymore.
Side deck then. I mean, you gave reason as to why this card is actually good and what scenarios could be best to use this card in, so side deck it. And I know that sounds like a weird stretch, but hear me out. You seem like someone who plays this game competitively, which means you probably go to some local tournament in your area. If you know someone running an annoying deck at your locals with set big life point cost spell cards, you can simply put Goblin Out of the Frying Pan in your side deck, particularly against him. Also, I could bring up Final Countdown decks, which those will always be around, so point is this card ain't useless, try again.
In fact, most of these players don't want to run these kinds of cards because of these costs. So already, you have a counter trap that's rather narrow in when it works best. And yes, I am well aware that if you use it against their quickplay spells during your turns, they don't get to use it again. That's nice and all, but again, that's if they're actually using quickplay spells during your turns. I think my biggest issue with Goblin Out of the Frying Pan is that it bounces the spell back to their hand, which means they can use it again, especially if you negated like a Raigeki. There is zero reason to negate Raigeki when they can simply use it again. And that's the problem. Goblin Out of the Frying Pan has a very narrow window of when it's used properly, and it's very, very allergic to MST kinds of destruction. Yeah, when you're waiting for this card to actually be, you know, good, it'll more likely be destroyed by that point. So, yeah, Goblin Out of the Frying Pan fucking sucks.
So you give all these examples as to how Goblin Out of the Frying Pan could be useful and good, but because it's a bit coincidental, it sucks. John, you could use that argument with practically every card in the game to some extent. Trap Holes, the whole series, is a good example of this. Bottomless Trap Hole only works when a monster has 1500 or more attack. Trap Tricks Trap Hole Nightmare only works if a monster uses its effect the turn it's summoned. Deep Dark Trap Hole only works if the monster is level 5 or higher, and Void Trap Hole only works with a monster with 2000 or more attack. Do all these cards now suck because they're coincidental? Furthermore, what about Exodia, a card that only works when you have all 5 pieces in your hand? Dark Arm Dragon, which can only be special summoned when you have exactly 3 dark monsters in the graveyard. Self-Destruct Button, which only works if you're at a 7000 life point disadvantage to your opponent, or even Life Equalizer, which requires an 8000 difference. I'm kind of wondering if my point has been made yet. Yes, Goblin Out of the Frying Pan is a bit coincidental, but so are a lot of cards. You may want a bunch of cards that can be used in every circumstance, and trust me, I don't blame you. But that'd be a whole different card game if that's what Yu-Gi-Oh! Decided to go for. It'd be another Magic the Gathering or Pokemon. And hell, even then, they have cards that can only be played under certain circumstances too.
I was willing to give it some credit. At least I was a little kinder to this card, but when all is said and done, it's just not good. You might as well just run a fucking Dark Bribe. Seriously, run Dark Bribe. It's kind of underrated.
I mean, I agree, but the thing is, Dark Bribe came out in 2007, whereas Goblin Out of the Frying Pan came out in 2006. Also, something to be mentioned, Goblin Out of the Frying Pan has more uses than what you had brought up. I was kind of waiting to see if you would have brought any of that up, but you didn't, so here goes. Charge of the Light Brigade. Not only would you mill 6 cards, but you would still get the search in a Lightsworn deck. And for those unaware, Lightsworns kind of thrive off of milling themselves. Then there's combining this card with Anti-Spell Fragrance. That would force your opponent into awkward situations where they must set their spell cards before activating them. You can also use Goblin Out of the Frying Pan in a situation where there's a rather big chain going on to disrupt it. After all, it's a counter trap card, so it gets priority over everything except counter, which is seriously the most fucked card in existence, and I love it.
These next 2 cards were requested by the same person. Thank you so much. He actually requested the 3rd card, but Axe of Fools is actually pretty good, so we're gonna skip over that. Aqua Course, on the other hand, it's kind of shit. Basically, if you have a monster with the same name as another monster, those monsters gain 500 attack points. Now keep in mind, they don't gain 500 attack points per amount of monsters on the field with the same name, they just merely gain a 500 attack point boost, that's it. So if I control 3 Dark Destroyers, they all gain 500 attack points. Simple enough. The biggest issue, unfortunately, is if your opponent also controls monsters with the same names. If your opponent controls a monster with the same name as another monster, they too gain 500 attack points, whether to get it off your monsters or to get it off their monsters. So as you can see, this card would be fucking useless against mirror matches, because it would ultimately result in them gaining a boost while you are shot out of luck. Yeah, simply put, Aqua Chorus, while a good idea, is just terrible in execution.
Ooh, careful John, your Dustin Smith is showing. Most cards have a downside to them, and truth be told, Aqua Course's downside isn't even that much of a detriment because it only occurs if your opponent happens to be running the same deck you are. And on top of that, assuming you are running this card in a mirror match, then the argument comes down to when do you play this card and what do you have to back it up. Also, can you simply get rid of their boosted card? Because if you can, I fail to see an issue. And even then, odds are if you're running this card, you're running it in a deck which can get out 3 copies of the same card without fail, like Harpies. So I do fail to see the issue here. I figured you would have just gotten onto its case for being coincidental. Ayo! Now I'm skipping ahead because all you do is compare Aqua Chorus to Chthonian Alliance, and while I could touch on it now, the problem persists into the next segment, which will seem all too familiar for those who watched my Dustin Smith commentary. Whee!
Ooh, this is a controversial pick. A Pointer of the Red Lotus. There was actually a time when I saw people actually use this card. Basically, you have to pay 2,000 life points and reveal all the cards in your hand. By doing so, you get to see what's in your opponent's hand, and you get to remove a card from their hand, until the opponent's next end phase. Okay, so here's how this would be played, okay? Imagine your opponent is running a bunch of hand traps. Obviously, you want to get rid of their hand traps as much as possible. So using this card would not only allow you to see if they have any hand traps and remove it temporarily, but you get a nice peek at their hand so you can combo it with shit like Mind Crush or DD Designator. Unfortunately, a Pointer isn't that good anymore. In fact, we have a card that's more or less the same idea but done so much better. We have the Forceful Checkpoint.
A card that has a completely different purpose to a Pointer of the Red Lotus. See, it's basically one monster from the hand to the graveyard versus one card that gets banished from the hand. 2 different zones, one significantly harder to play off of than the other. Also, the chain ability of a Pointer of the Red Lotus gives the Forceful Checkpoint a run force money, as the Forceful Checkpoint is, well, only activated via attacks, whereas a Pointer of the Red Lotus can be chained off of Mystical Space Typhoon and Twin Twisters. Now, that said, allow me to kind of explain where this ties into Chthonian Alliance, as once again, there are 2 different purposes. Chthonian Alliance is there for the sole purpose of making one monster really huge and walloping on their opponent, whereas Aqua Chorus's purpose is more for spammable decks that boost themselves up. One big monster versus 3, basically. basically. Going back to the example I gave, Harpy Lady 1 gives a boost of 300 attack. Have 3 copies of those for a maximum of 1400 extra attack, or at the bare minimum of 800 when you have 3 Harpy Ladies in general on the field, as they are all treated as Harpy Lady on their own. And imagine what you can do with Cyber Dragons. Whee!
Our last card for today, and oh Jesus Christ. You know, the minute this card got printed, I was fearing this card for the longest time, and it's finally here. Cold Feet.
Holy crap, requested by Dustin Smith. We've come full circle, everyone.
And yes, this card is supposed to be a dig at Cold Wave, which is banned now. Thank fucking goodness, because the card was stupidly broken. Anyways, Cold Feet works like this. You cannot activate, set, or use the effect of your spells and traps until the end of the turn. Okay, so you might be scratching your head and wondering what the hell this card is even about. Like, why would anyone ever use this? This is basically the equivalent of saying, I don't feel like using any of my spells and traps this turn. Then simply don't. You don't need an extra card to do that. Now, I've seen some people say that, oh, if you combo this with Mr. Riftpile, your opponent doesn't get to activate their spells and traps.
Okay, that's fine and dandy, but you're kind of talking about a really narrow combo piece. And that is already pretty shitty.
Okay, but if I may, you do later bring up the fact that this card can basically avoid negative side effects to chaining effects, such as Mass Hypnosis' in-phase effect and Brain Research's Lab's destruction effect, just as some examples brought to you by the Yu-Gi-Oh! Wikia, because I'm too fucking lazy to come up with my own examples this time. I won't deny that yes, Cold Feet is a bit more of a coincidental card than anything else you could bring up, and yes, normally this is a card with no benefits to the user in question. But again, you're complaining about a card being coincidental. Now, what's interesting about this problem that really seems to persist is earlier in your first video, you know that big segment I skipped, Gate Guardian? Allow me to play a segment of that particular entry because I feel like this is gonna really hit home something.
In a way. Yeah, didn't you think of that? Rank 7s from Gate Guardian parts. That's just hilarious.
One of the cards that you chose as an example to cards that you could have XE summoned with the Gate Guardian parts was number 7 Lucky Straight. A card whose effect only really works when you roll a 7 from 2 dice. Yeah, it does get that attack boost, but honestly at that point it has a chance of becoming a beat stick like Gate Guardian. I mean, it also has a chance of doing nothing, kind of like Sand Gambler, but I digress. The point is, you seem to have this hate against cards that are coincidental, and what's more coincidental than a card that relies on luck, forcing you in a position where you have a 6 out of 36 chance, or a 1/6 of a chance to actually successfully activate it. Want to talk about coincidental? You don't even have a say to whether or not Lucky Straight is activated. My point is, there seems to be a double standard that I don't quite understand here.